from the Signature Bank Studios.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Again, Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling and the men and women of Chicago Police responsible for security outside of the convention venues did a good job. They've done a good job so far. They have held the line and restrained the Bolsheviks against their worst impulses, though not without incident. Superintendent Snelling detailing yesterday.
We had people deploy pepper gas toward our officers, throw water on them, throw water bottles, sticks, things of that nature, and they were continuously trying to take down the fence, and our officers responded as professionally as we trained them to.
Yeah, in all, 4 people were arrested they took down 3 panels of a metal fencing on the north perimeter, but they stopped them right away. And the U.S. Capitol Police are there, and they had riot gear on. And listen to this protester. Like, people are so triggered that are at this event in protesting.
I don't see no riot here! Why are you in riot gear? I don't see no riot here! Why are you in riot gear?
I mean, you get the picture. It's just chaos and mayhem, and it's
not
everybody's
chaos.
angry about everything.
It's not chaos and mayhem, but it would be if you were not clamping down the way that police are, allowing them to screech as much as they want, but not allowing them to be violent or exercise their impulses to be vandals either.
Yeah, just because if there is any vandalism, they do arrest them. And they tried to set up tents last night, and the cops said absolutely not. And the protesters listened and then took down the tents.
Yeah, they'll be arrested. I mean, it's a catch and release like they do at the border. But regardless, the police are doing what they can given the environment. Yep. So far, we'll see if they're able to hold up for another couple of days. Thomas Weitzel is a retired chief of police for the village of Riverside. He joins us now. Tom, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
So I use our assessment, one that you share as well, about the job police have done thus far.
I do. For day one, it's only day one, but I thought it was excellent response. And while there were some arrests, and very minor, and there was some breaching of the fence. And, that's kind of important because that fence that was breached was the first time that the Chicago Police Department have used the cement barricades behind them and to anchor them into place. So that was pretty significant that they got through there. And I read that of those 4 individuals arrested, 3 of them were from out of state. One as far as Utah. And they had one arrest where an individual tried to get into the venue area with a loaded .22 pistol. And that individual was a convicted felon, and part of his argument to get in was that he had legal possession to have a gun in Illinois, which is a ridiculous argument, but that was a Secret Service arrest, too.
Do you have any color on the guy who climbed the fence and then got arrested along with his big teddy bear, where he's from and
where the teddy came from? Was it one at a carnival or Great America?
Yeah, more
I'm
to the.
Sure that was.
Well, also,
that was probably bought here in Chicago area, but it's like a prop to bring with you. And
well, I just if we have any profile in him, like which Ivy League school he graduated from.
No, but it most likely was from out of state because they said there was only the one. At least thus far, they're going to do another briefing this morning. But only one arrest was a Chicago resident. The others were from out of state. Mm-hmm. So I would assume that's the MO. And I also read that the Support Palestine was the worst. That they had been preparing for abortion rights, anti-policing, all kinds of protesters. But so far, they have said that the most difficult to deal with, which I thought they've dealt with excellent, was the pro-Palestinian protesters.
Well, it stands to reason. I mean, normally your pro-terrorist group element will be the most obstreperous. So I think that's not surprising, particularly what we've seen on college campuses and in big cities over the last several months. That's not surprising. Probably not surprising to the police either.
No, and that did you see that they put those handbills out to those protesters that had the email address for the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and they encouraged you to send video. So the video that's being shot there by their own team, so to speak, they encourage you to send that directly to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office about abuse of police power.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. I like the daring them approach. That's good. I was on Fox yesterday talking a bit about this, and they've had they've talked to some families who have lost a child to gun violence in Chicago, to people who are basically repeat violent offenders who find their way back to the streets per our justice system in Cook County, and end up hurting and killing more people than they had hurt and killed up until that point. And Bill Hemmer asked me, what is with Chicago? Why this endemic, systemic violence that seems intractable? I had an answer, but I wanted yours.
It's entrenched in basically almost in the way you're raised. I know some individuals might not want to hear this, but by the time the police get involved, I used to get complaints all the time, like, what can you do? Why aren't you intervening? Why has this person got to this extent? When it was a violent crime, whether it be a stabbing, a shooting, it doesn't necessarily have to be a homicide, but these traits and these respect for law and respect for law enforcement and this societal norms, they started long before we get involved. They started when they were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and then the culture of the family adds to this, and then you get them as young adults, sometimes 13, 14, 15 years old, and you have a criminal justice system, and especially a juvenile justice system, that is a total train wreck here in Illinois, and especially in Cook County. It's just a breeding for lawlessness. Well,
right, but the other big cities have street gangs. Organized street gangs. There is violence in other big cities with much bigger populations than Chicago. Not as much violence, but it exists, and so there has to be something to do with the response. So yes, I mean there's issues with family structure and environment and the cycle of violence, but there has to be something with respect to the response that is different. It would seem to me, and I think there is. And
I think there is too.
Yeah, and so that's where I went. So to the response to it.
Some of it is political. I mean, you have I think Illinois. When you travel, you can get people to tell you that what's going on in Illinois, what's going on in Chicago. Right? The political culture here is one of, we're going to give everybody a second, third, and fourth, and fifth chance. And I mean violent individuals. We have systems set up, systematic systems, where you're automatically... I just read a story the other day where somebody that was convicted of a fatal hit and run was sentenced to 9 years. And the minute they walked into the state correctional facility, they were given 4.5 years off of their sentence. And they ended up serving 2 years, and that person was already a repeat offender from previous DUIs and had a revoked driver's license previously several times. I mean, the system is set up like that, and I believe that's our politicians doing that. It's certainly not the average citizens or the police. It's this culture of the Democratic Party, I believe, because they're the ones controlling Springfield. Let's be honest; it's not the Republicans.
Yeah, and don't you think the criminals know I'm just going to get a slap on the wrist, so what does it matter? There's no consequences for their actions.
Yeah, there's none. It's complete lawlessness at times. There's no accountability. There's no fear. They're not a fear of being arrested. Then even when they are arrested, there's no fear that there's going to be any consequence. And I can tell you with certainty, just this short as 2021, when I was still working, when we would arrest criminals, violent criminals, they would, a lot of them didn't know Riverside. Like, where's Riverside? Is Riverside in Cook County? They didn't even know where it was. Okay, they were like, "Are we in Cook County?" Like, because then, are we in DuPage County? Am I being arrested in Will County? Because they knew in Cook County there was nothing happening to them, and they would actually say that it was a real thing. So they know.
Right. And something else, too. Again, just because you're a criminal doesn't mean you have no idea what's going on. In point of fact, you may have much more of an idea of what's going on in a particular neighborhood than the politicians and the pundits and the media. And so I find it interesting, a couple of things BLM Brandon has said this week. One was to the question about police resources still being available for the neighborhoods around the city. And he said, every neighborhood will be protected, every single one. That's my commitment. And he lives, the irony of all ironies, he lives in the Austin neighborhood on the west side, which in 2024 thus far is the most violent neighborhood in Chicago. 31 murders, 121 people shot. And when you hear him making these demonstrative promises about public safety and everybody knowing what they know about the neighborhood in which the mayor lives, the whole thing is a big joke.
No, that's just an outright lie. Chicago's doing the best they can to keep cover the neighborhoods, but if anybody thinks that they still have the same resources these 4 days that they would have on a normal day, which is already depleted, they're kidding themselves. And they're not allowing out-of-state police officers or suburban police officers to have anything to do with patrolling the neighborhoods. Those are just officers that are being held back in case, things really break loose to bring into the DNC area. So they're relying on 12-hour shifts. They're relying on everybody being back in patrol, pulling most detectives out, pulling most, tactical officers, putting them in uniform, and then putting them into the neighborhoods, and it's still not enough.
And speaking of if everything went awry, the other question that he was asked, we discussed this a bit yesterday, but get your reaction. He's asked, if things do go off the rails, will you pull up the bridges to cut off the river, or to use the river as a cutoff, essentially? And his response was that is that we build bridges and we cross bridges, which was his effort at a rhetorical flourish by way of saying no, he wouldn't do that. Whether that would be necessary or not, is that wise to take sort of a ideological position that this is something we won't do if things went awry?
No, well, you're right. It is an ideological position, and it's not the right thing to do. I doubt they would do that, because they're very concerned about optics. There's no question. But if things went crazy, you have to use every tool at your disposal, because you have to protect the city and the downtown area and the people that live there and the residents. And to take something off the board would be, misconduct in my opinion. But they're absolutely would be concerned of what that would look like play out on national media throughout the United States and beyond. So they're very concerned with the optics of this event, no doubt.
Well, that's exactly it, and that's really the statement, isn't it? Rank order priority: optics, number one; public safety, number two. That's sort of speaks to that Hemmer question about why there is endemic violence. That's the rank order priority, and everybody knows it, whether they want to admit it or not. Thomas Weitzel is retired chief of police for the village of Riverside. Tom, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Dan Amy. Have a great morning.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
After 30 years of doing knee and hip replacements, Dr. Mitchell Scheinkup thought there had to be a better way, and that led him to regenerative medicine.
I was one of the first orthopedic surgeons to do it.
Now, after